Hey everyone, Andre here along with Joey, our reviewer of Sonic Frontiers. Joey, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you, Andre?
I'm doing good, Joey. I'm excited to talk more about this game. Find out first off, I want to find out more about your opinion on it, and then talk about our general thoughts, in total. Because I think we feel a little different about this game, even though we pretty much agree on most things. So it's going to be very interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Because just in case people don't know, you're the one who handled our review. You played through it, and I guess just give us a quick recap. How did you feel about Sonic Frontiers?
Sonic Frontiers, Andre, in my humble opinion as a reviewer and a Sonic fan, which I gotta reemphasize to the people who think I'm a Sonic hater, like, I am a Sonic fan. Like, I've grown up on those games, the 3D games especially. I like the 3D games more than most people, I think. But I'm still mixed on Sonic Frontiers. I gave the game a mixed rating because at first I really, really enjoyed this game. Like I was really looking forward to like when I wasn't playing the game, I was really hyped to jump back into it. But as I kept playing, I felt like a lot of the bad design choices, and there are a lot of them, just really showed their ugly heads the more I kept playing. And even the stuff I really enjoyed felt really stale too as I kept playing. The open zone sections just I kind of like they kind of fizzled out to me near the end, which thankfully was near the end at least. But but I didn't think it came together as well in like the overall package. There's a really solid groundwork here for future Sonic games, I will say. But man, they kind of fumbled the bag here with the cyberspace stages, which just aren't that fast. And they fumbled it with the story, which was like, I know people say like I don't really play Sonic games for the story, even though there are diehard Sonic fans that do play them for the story and the characters. But here, I could tell they tried to do something, but it just fizzled out into a wet fart by the end.
Oh, wow, a wet fart, man.
Yeah.
Sonic
First
should
of
lay,
all, you used those words first, Andre.
Sonic is to lay off those chili dogs, let me tell
I
you.
know.
So
There's no chili dogs in this game too, which is just disappointing.
that's surprising. All right, I added some gameplay into our review brief or our discussion briefly for people. So, yeah. So I wanted to. Yeah. So that's very interesting to me because it's interesting in that you and I we've been discussing this game because we got a couple of review codes who were able to both play it. I was playing more casually in my off time, not really any intention of covering it at all. Because I figured, it's a Sonic game. I bounce off pretty quick. I'm not a huge fan of the 3D Sonic games, and sure enough, starting off, I was not feeling it. I was not liking this game at all, and it seemed like we had opposite trajectories. Where initially you were very much enjoying it, as I recall, and
Yes.
to the point where you mentioned it was addictive, and you found yourself going back to it and just looking, enjoyed running around the world. And I didn't, and I had to force myself through the initial couple of hours. But once I did, it started clicking into place for me, and at that point, my enjoyment of the game, I would say, just continued to climb for the most part throughout the gameplay, with a few exceptions. Even though there are still many things that kind of annoyed me or bothered me about the game. Overall, I just found myself really enjoying it. And then you had the opposite impression, where you started off on a high note and it just kept dropping off for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. What didn't you like about it at first? I think we should start there.
Yeah, what I didn't like about it is I think two things. One, I think I just had general different expectations for a Sonic game in an open world format. Like I always thought it would be cool if they went with the a more momentum based style of gameplay, like in the 2D games, where it rewards you building speed and like building the level design around that. Where I thought it'd be neat, for instance, if you had to find like a tall point in the level to run down and build speed to traverse somewhere else. That's not all this game is about. This is very much a boost formula style of gameplay, just now in an open world setting or open zone setting. Where it's not open world according to
Mhm.
Sega, and that takes some getting used to because Sonic controls very almost digitally in that like once you stop boosting or let go of the control stick, he stops instantly. There is no sense of momentum really in this game outside maybe the drop dash, which you almost never have to do.
Yeah.
But once you get then beyond that, so there was my initial hope for the game was a little bit different. Then the game's a little janky. The way
Oh yeah.
Sonic, yeah, the way some of the physics work. Sonic has like a combo early on where if you attack multiple times, he kind of like rolls back, but it doesn't account for terrain differences. He'll like just roll into the environment briefly before like popping out. And there's just like a lot of minor things like that. The UI is overbearing. There's way too many tutorials early on. There's constant text and voice telling you how to do things. I'm like, let me just discover it for myself. But Once I got past all that, and once I adjusted some options, which by the way, everyone should try experimenting with the options in this game, but there's so many things that can help improve your experience. That's when it started to click for me, and the fact that what I think is what really sealed the deal for me is just how much fun I had running around. Like, I didn't even care that much about completing specific objectives. I barely even used my map. And I think that's maybe why I enjoyed this so much. I just had fun running around, activating random things I came across, seeing where those would take me, because whenever you solve a puzzle, like it would spawn something in the environment, like a grind rail, I would just grind that, see where that went, and then I just had fun just, running around. I thought it just felt good to, like, boost across the terrain, especially once you upgrade it a few times, you can get that faster top speed. And I mean, I think that's it. I just enjoyed roaming around the open zone, and that was it. And so that's most of the game. Most of the other stuff didn't detract too much from me, even though I do agree that the ending sucks. The ending. Oh, and also I should mention, chat, we're not going to spoil anything specific, so don't worry. We're only giving general impressions. But yeah, the ending is a complete letdown, both in the narrative sense and the gameplay sense. It doesn't build up to anything. It just ends abruptly, and it doesn't do anything with the story that they've been building up.
Right, and I think I read a comment, but comments can be full of crap sometimes, that apparently the true ending is unlocked in hard mode, which I haven't fact checked that yet. But yeah, that'd be kind of stupid if that was the case, because we got no indication that would happen. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, it totally builds up to nothing, essentially. Like, I felt like Breath of the Wild kind of had a similar problem, but at least that game had a final boss. Mm-hmm. This game was just like, press square and you're done. Very weird stuff. What difficulty did you play on? John was asking. So Andre was on hard mode.
Yeah,
Were you on hard mode?
I was for a bit, but I swapped back to normal, I think, by the time I had beaten the game. I'd have to double check. So
is that your roommate, by the way?
I don't know who that is.
John Whitmer.
Yeah, don't know who that is. So
you don't know who that is? Okay, because I thought whatever.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, so the ending, if there is a secret ending, like, the game doesn't tell you that at all. It gives no indication. You can change the difficulty at any time too, which is especially weird. So, yeah, I don't know.
Something tells me it's not true then if you can change your difficulty at any time.
Yeah, and the weird thing is too, it doesn't even tell you what it changes. Like, I thought it might change the challenges, for instance, in a level, or like the requirements of the cyberspace stages, but it didn't seem to affect those at all. And then the game even tells you that some things may not be effective when you change it. I'm like, what does this mean? And that is one of my problems with the game, is like, it's kind of obtuse in some ways, just in general. And I mean, in how some things work, and yeah, that's kind of where it does fall off a little bit, in that it just, I think there is what I think one of the main issues here, Joey, for me at least, is that it lacks refinement. Like, I think if this game had a few more months in the oven, it could have been even better than it is, because there's so many of the elements of this game just feel kind of like they were designed by entirely different teams and don't quite mesh together. Like, the cyber zones or cyberspace levels are, they feel very different to the fishing levels, which feels very different to the open zone gameplay, which feels very different to how the upgrades and combat work. It all feels very separate and distinct, which is,
yeah. And they throw in a bunch of, like, you got space shooter levels too, which are like hacking mini games. Mm-hmm. You got pinball shows up there for a second. It kind of reminds me like a lesser Sonic Boom, which, if you haven't played that game, which most of you haven't, you're not missing much. They threw in a lot of different, like, genres in there. Sometimes it turned into a top-down bullet hell shooter. Very strange stuff. Sonic Frontiers doesn't do it as much. It's still largely focused on that open zone gameplay. But yeah, definitely, I agree with you there. It seems like they threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and to see what stuck. And man, those Big the Cat fishing games are super easy.
Yeah, those are really weird. Like, it takes no skill at all. You just hit. It's effectively a quick time event, if even that. But that's a weird thing though. Like, most of the things, like, for instance, the cyberspace levels, I never looked forward to them. I never really wanted to do them, but it didn't bother me that much. The same thing for the fishing. The fishing's kind of dumb, but it didn't bother me. Like, it did serve the purpose.
Harmless.
Yeah, it's harmless. Yeah, it does break up the open zone gameplay at the least. Provides a bit of a distraction. Kind of like how some of those, what does the game even call them? Those overworld puzzles that unlock parts of the map.
Challenges. They're just
challenges. Yeah. Like, those are all kind of dumb too, like, none of them, I think I failed 2 of them out of like 100, maybe more.
Yeah.
They are all incredibly easy. calling them puzzles is like really overstating what they actually are. Like Korok puzzles are more challenging than these are in this game.
Yeah.
Like what's with the one where you have five, like 3 or 5 panels, you just like roll back and forth on them until you activate them, like Simon says.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah,
That was so ridiculous. Yeah.
But,
I love Carlos saying, Joey, you're already bringing up the Boom comparisons.
mm.
Did not mean to do that. The game is way better than Sonic Boom.
See?
So, yeah.
No, here's another point to bring up. But I forget. I think you mentioned earlier that you do tend to like at least some of the 3D Sonic games. I have not. I have not liked most of the 3D Sonics. I find like the best. I've always found I enjoy the first level the most in most of them. You know, like Sonic Adventure 2. I love that initial San Francisco level, but once you get past that, Sonic Colors I did like. That's the one exception. So I don't know if that factors into how I felt about this game, like with me having no expectation for a Sonic story, for instance. I even though the ending is a letdown in the gameplay sense as well, that didn't bother me all that much because it didn't like take away from the fun I had up to that point. But I can see if I were looking more forward to the story wrapping up in a satisfactory manner, that could be annoying and bothersome. Again, with that, assuming this final boss isn't a thing, which the game should tell you about if that were, but that secret final boss,
Yeah, and I think more people in the chat said that yes, it is the case, which strange design choice, hiding that final boss behind a difficulty.
Yeah.
We got a super chat from Putin Plays, $5. Thank you so much. If you can adjust gameplay stuff in the overworld like speed, can you also do that for the cyberspace levels? This was something I was curious about. I didn't actually check this out yet, but I'm certain that the cyberspace levels, they don't. I don't think what the stuff you change in the overworld applies to the cyberspace levels, because from what I've seen, that you can you can upgrade your ring capacity in the open zone, but the ring capacity stays at 999 in the cyberspace levels. So I assume, don't quote me on this, but I assume your speed, even if you upgrade your speed, it stays the same in the cyberspace levels at all times, because speed and ring capacity can be changed in the open zone, but the ring capacity stays the same in cyberspace. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, the cyberspace levels are kind of a weird thing because as you mentioned in your review, the gameplay, the style of gameplay used in the open zone, or the style of the way the controls work in general, don't work as well in the cyberspace zones, whatever the heck they're called.
Yeah.
With that said, I don't think I dislike them quite as much as you. Like, I never really looked forward to them, but they didn't bother me that much. And I think it may help that I'm not that used to the other 3D Sonics. Played a bit of them. I usually dropped off pretty quick. And so the fact that it feels different to those also wasn't an issue for me. With that said, though, yeah, the level design, again, doesn't work super well with how the controls work here, especially given the fact that just the way that the way that those levels are structured, being completely linear as opposed to the open zone gameplay, it means I was like flying off the platforms quite a bit. Like it never quite works as well as the main game, and they just feel like a kind of random inclusion to pad out the gameplay, if you will. But
yeah,
I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the challenge levels of Mario Sunshine, where you don't have flood, for instance. I think that's, and those weren't great either. In fact, Joey, I think this entire game reminds me of Mario Sunshine, where there's like a lot of jank, there's a lot of like odd decisions about it, and I hated that game originally too. But when I went back to that game for the 3D All-Stars collection, I'm like, you know what? There are redeeming elements of that game, and I think maybe that's kind of how I felt about this game going through it. Like, I was able to see past its many issues. Like, if I wrote a list of things I liked and disliked, the things I disliked would be far longer than the things I liked. However, the things I liked are the majority of the game, the parts I spend the most time with, and they were so fun overall that, the rest didn't bother me too much.
Yeah, and I think that's where, first of all, I also think this game is a lot like Mario Odyssey, too. I mentioned this in my review, because with Mario Odyssey, I got, I recently replayed that for the 5th anniversary, too. You got that sense of, okay, here's a world, go. That's what Sonic Frontiers does, too. Here's a giant sandbox, there's stuff you can collect, go crazy. And that's initially where I got my excitement from, was like and that's why I was always excited to start a new island, too. You get thrown into these islands, and the game says, go nuts, go crazy, and that's where I really liked it at first, was because you get these little, I don't even know exactly what they're really called in this game, but you get these floating platforms that lead to, like, collectibles, and they're essentially 3D or even 2D Sonic levels on their own, little micro levels, and you basically go around and check those things off, and that's where I initially got my excitement from. but like most things, like most of these open world games that I start, it gets kind of repetitive after a while. And I think after I finish those challenges, after I finish the story stuff in those islands, I didn't see much incentive to go back and really explore those islands even more because man, the after you get the challenges, the last things to really collect are the memory tokens, which unlock more cutscenes too with the characters that need those memory tokens. And after that, I was just like, I don't care about the story really. I don't care about finding the rest of these memory tokens. I'm going to move on to the next world. And then you get that same loop over and over again with the rest of the islands. I found most of the stuff and then I was just content. And then I moved on to the next island. I didn't make it my goal to really 100% those games. Fun fact, my save file got deleted. So here's a PSA for you people who are starting Sonic Frontiers. Make a manual save file. There's 4 save files. One of them is an autosave file. And if you only stick with the autosave file, you're screwed if you start a new game. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, as a general rule, never trust autosave. I always manually save, yeah. That sucks. That is a huge oversight from the game.
Jake asked a really good question. Is it a good podcast game? Yes, it is.
It actually is.
Yeah, that's turn your brain off and just listen to a podcast while playing.
And you know, that is kind of largely. I mean, I always play my brain off. So, but
yes.
I think that actually is a good way to play this game. Not needing a podcast, but like just go with the flow. Like that's kind of what I did. Like I wasn't usually too often thinking about like, okay, I want to do this objective next, or even though the game's constantly reminding you of what you can do next. I really for the first 3 worlds in particular, I just ran around and just did whatever looked interesting to me. Kind of like how I played Breath of the Wild. Like I wasn't too focused on the end game. I was just wanting to do things in the moment. And to the point, as I mentioned, I barely even checked the map, which I think may have helped. I never had the open world problem where I felt inundated with all the things I needed to do, all the memory tokens I needed to find, all the little rock guys I needed to collect, all the upgrades I had to do. None of that was ever an issue, and because of that, I rarely reached a point in the game where it's like, oh, you need to go do more of this. That only happened to me in the 5th world, I think, near the end of the game, where I actually was trying to wrap it up. I'm like, okay, let's move on here. Before that, though, the game just flowed really well because I was just having so much fun, just kind of darting around, jumping off platforms, seeing what other ways there are of like accessing areas in the game. Like one of my favorite moments, Joey, I think is in the 5th world actually, is you had that giant structure in the middle, and I had fun just trying to run up the thing. I'm like, can I get on top of this without using like the grind rails or springs or whatever else is around here? And the fact that I was able to do that, I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And that was like a bit of a Breath of the Wild moment here. Even though a lot of it is superficially similar to Breath of the Wild, it very much does not feel like Breath of the Wild.
Right. I know a lot of people got mad when I compared it to Breath of the Wild, and I'm like, okay, well, you can't deny that like Breath of the Wild influenced a ton of games. Oh,
totally, yeah, absolutely.
So it's not even like they're trying to be Breath of the Wild. It's still very much a Sonic game. But when you say like you barely like opened your map and stuff, I was the opposite. So I kind of see where our differences lie now.
Yeah.
You're more like, I'm just gonna explore, gonna go have fun, who cares? Which I am also like to an extent, but at a certain point I'm like, okay, time to focus. Open the map, mark a token on my map, and then keep doing that. I kept doing that for a while, and I'm like, this isn't fun anymore.
Right.
So that's kind of where our differences lie too, is like I am very much like focused on checking off every little box. I'm like, this is a lot of open world games, and this is open zone, but it's open world. Come on, stop it. It was. And when I got to the 3rd island and those tasks started shifting into 2D, that's when I got really frustrated. That was frustrating.
I fully agree with that. I think the 3rd island's probably my least favorite, although it did grow on me over time. But the way they incorporate the 2D sections is weird in this game, where you will just randomly be thrown into one, and there's no way to get out, except as you mentioned in the review, if you back out or you finish it. There was literally a point, Joey, where I landed on a ledge of 3 coins, one of which is on the plane I was, but the other 2 were in front and behind me, and I could not get them because I was in the 2D segment. I'm like, it's literally an inch away, but I can't touch the stupid thing.
There was a squid that I wanted to fight, one of the overworld bosses, but I was stuck on the 2D plane, so there was in the back taunting me and shooting stuff at me while I was stuck in a 2D plane. I thought those 2D plane ideas were cool, but man, they need to find a way to like break out of those if you don't want to be stuck in one. Man,
100%. That's like one of the refinements that they could make to this game, like with an update down the line that I think could improve the overall experience. And that's, I do hope that they do like continue to update this game and make enhancements to it. But I think there is room for improvement here, absolutely. And if not here, then in a sequel. But I think there's refinements they can make here now that would be better. Joey, what did you think of the combat in the game?
I'm like the rest of the game. I mixed on the combat too. But I thought it was fun for a bit. It's messy still because it felt like the moves, Sonic's like combat abilities, didn't really organically flow with the combat or even alongside the enemies. It felt like they just stuck whatever move Sonic made him look, whatever move made Sonic look cool, like the missile ability. I forget what it's called, where it literally turns Sonic into a torpedo. And I don't know, it just kind of felt like they just mishmashed a bunch of things together. I'm trying my best to really describe how that was. I don't know, it's like they said, here's an enemy from a game, here's the hero from a game, let's just smash them together. I'm not sure if that really explains it well enough. It's like how Smash Bros, it's kind of like, oh, Sonic and Mario are fighting, how cool is that? But it's not like I don't know. It's not like they're meant to be in the same game per se, but they're just two character models fighting. That's kind of how I feel like the combat is here. It's character models fighting, if that makes sense.
No, it kind of does. Yeah, the combat, as I said earlier, feels like almost like it came from a different type of game. It's a lot. It's very combo based. It doesn't mesh well with the fast-paced, open nature of the gameplay otherwise. Although I do kind of like the what's that loop mechanic? The where you draw the circle, Joey?
Side loop.
Yeah, there we go. I actually kind of like that. And I actually wish they had built more on that. Like if you could draw different shapes, for instance, and you would have different effects on the enemies within or something. But yeah, the combat itself like is lame, and that's why I turned on the auto combat ability you can unlock, or sorry, the auto combo ability where it just activates combos for you. I'm like, heck yeah, the faster I deal with this combat, the better. But what's interesting is I just have footage of the boss fights up on the screen, and I think those actually overall work better with the combat system. Those felt like. Yeah, those felt like they had more platforming elements. Like there was that one boss in the desert where you had to ride the rings around. That was actually really cool to climb up to it. And even the first boss in the game where you have to climb up its legs to go on top of it, which I'm actually showing right now, I think. I think all stuff, like even though they still have their issues, I think it actually worked pretty well. And I didn't mind those fights as much.
Yeah, they were like Sonic levels themselves, and I think those were the most creative boss fights. Still, some of those bosses were lame, like that shark, which was literally just one giant.
That shark is stupid. Yeah,
it's such a dumb implementation. Yeah, but even the tower, I think it's called Asura or Asuna. I already forgot. I think it says right. Well. I had problems with that too, but even then I still thought it was a really cool idea, just running up its arm and getting its weak point. Very simple kind of boss. The squid is also kind of cool, even if it has frustrating moments. Like trying to get on top of it was way more difficult than it should have been. Like why? Like there was a point in the review I put it into where I warped through I warped through the path and I fell to the ground and I'm like, really? Like, it was nuts.
Yeah,
there's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, there's definitely some weird issues with the game. I mean, which, to be fair, isn't common with open world games, so I can't fault the game too much for some of those weird issues. Like, yeah, where you can. I had a couple times.
It's not the most buggy game.
It actually isn't. Yeah, to the game's credit, like for for like Sonic Team's first open world game, it's surprisingly it's not as buggy as you might expect in comparison to other open world games, like some Ubisoft ones, for instance. So
or Bethesda games.
Yeah, or Bethesda games especially. Exactly. Real quick, Extra Sweet 88 had a question in the chat asking, I hear about pop-in. I hear about game-breaking pop-in. Is it annoying? Can you live with it? Can it be fixed? Would you buy Frontiers? So what's your take on this, Joey?
It's not game-breaking at all.
No.
It's just kind of like annoying. Like why is it taking so long for things to pop into the environment? It is kind of just, and you can even see like during the like the grass level islands, you see the grass pop in too, and it's just like Sonic is surrounded by a circle of grass textures getting generated. It's very strange stuff, but I don't think it's anything game breaking. And I do think it's weird though that it's still there. Like I saw it in the preview builds that IGN posted, and I'm like, hopefully they'll fix that. No, it's still there. It's not even like they could have made it so it was like a fade in. It's just like
right, yeah. Like
Yeah.
Wyvern No Dragon says, like enemies in grass in Breath of the Wild, and yeah, it's pretty similar. Breath of the Wild actually hides it way better. Like you have to be looking for the grass to appear, in my experience.
Yeah.
Whereas in Sonic Frontiers, it's kind of more in your face. But you're usually moving so fast, like that. The grass issue isn't that much of an issue. But you will
Right.
see a lot pop in with, in particular, the things that you spawn into the world, like the grind rails or springs or other things. It seems like the main terrain is almost always present. It's when you add in the floating elements that those are the ones that pop in. They are a little distracting. It's not game breaking. I would prefer it's not there, obviously, but it's not. I mean, it's nowhere yet. It's nowhere near game breaking. So I don't know where that complaint comes from.
Yeah. So there's a question from the chat,
On
Noah,
PS5,
that
at
Charles.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is on PS5 too. So it's kind of like, yeah, if you're planning on picking this up on a next gen, what is they've been out for 2 years now.
Yeah, current gen. Yep.
Yeah, current gen. I feel like it should be fine. I didn't think the performance, like playing in 60 FPS mode, I didn't find too many performance issues. If I did barely even notice anything, so it runs smoothly, I would say, besides the pop in. But Noah the Charles Man asks, and here's kind of where we're getting to the story part of things: are the characters well written? So we're not going to spoil anything again, but this story was jarring, I will say. So I will say there's no, the CGI cutscenes you see in the trailer, none of them are in this game. It's all in game, but the cutscenes are very oddly made. The character animations are stiff. There's nothing that really happens in the cutscenes. It's just a lot of talking in them. The voice direction, Andre, is so strange. Like, these are all the characters in this game are voiced by the veteran actors who've been playing since like Sonic Colors. Roger Craig Smith comes back as Sonic, Mike Pollock as Eggman, Colleen O'Shaughnessy as Tails. Their deliveries are so dry and kind of boring. It's very, like Eggman, when the first time he talks, I was like, he doesn't sound like he's Eggman. He sounds like he's just Mike Pollock doing half an Eggman voice. It's
Just egg.
yeah,
More
it's
egg than man.
strange. Yeah, he's more egg than man, exactly. Or he's more man than egg. Who knows? It's all up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they were told to sound more natural and more serious, but they just sound bored.
Yeah, I can see that to an extent. Like I actually had to check whether it was the same voice actor for Sonic because it sounds like he's really downplaying his usual performance, and that must have been an intentional direction choice on behalf of the game. Like it feels like that they may be targeting a slightly different demographic with this one beyond just Sonic fans, and they wanted to tone down the usual Sonic elements maybe a bit. Try to go for like a slightly more mature take on this. A la Breath of the Wild, for instance. That's the only thing I can imagine because yeah, everything just sounds like it's just a lower key than you might expect. And as the game went on, it bothered me less and less. There are some moments I think that are actually delivered fairly well for what they're going for. But yeah, there were also times too where I had the same sense. Like it sounds like they're just reading the lines and not really adding much of the character into it. And yeah, it must have. I can only imagine it was a direction choice because it affects almost every character in the game.
Yeah, totally. And these are actors that have played these characters before. And somebody mentioned in the chat, you don't need to be over the top to be good. Okay, but you got to get somewhere. Like the performances are like not even like mid range. They're kind of like on the lower end. Like they don't need to be over the top. But Sonic Forces had better voice direction.
Mm. I will say though, in regards. Oh, sorry, you totally broke up there, Joey. What did you say at the end there?
I said even Sonic Forces had better voice direction, I thought. And that game was like leaning a little too heavily into the plot where the game suffered as a result. But man, it just doesn't feel right here in Sonic Frontiers.
Yeah, I think for me, I got more used to it as it went on. It was definitely jarring at first, but I think once I started to understand a little bit what they're going for, I don't know if I want to say I appreciate it, but I better understood it. But I think I think beyond that though, and the issue you touched on in the review, is it doesn't all really amount to all that much. Like I think they touch on some things that are really gonna excite the Sonic fan base. Like there are some lore implications here that are actually, I think, pretty cool as one who doesn't really follow the Sonic lore all that much. I'm like, oh, they're actually going there. They're actually exploring something. But then it doesn't do anything with it.
And that's the thing, like without spoiling the thing, I'll say like they answer questions, right? Like, oh, what civilization populated this these islands. Like, yeah, that's answered, but like they don't explain the whys or the hows or the wheres, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
tell you what happened, they don't say why, and they don't elaborate on who these things are. It's just like
I will say, yeah, and I fully agree. Like the game is like it ends in such a way. Again, apparently we need to explore this final boss thing, Joey, and see if it actually matters or not. If that is
yeah.
real, that hidden final boss. But putting that aside, yeah, it just ends in a way that just kind of like, yeah, it's just so unsatisfying that it almost colors your entire impression of it. Like I was able to look, it didn't bother me all that much because I didn't care too much about the story in general, but I can see how it would. But I will say putting that aside, there are a few elements of the game that of the story that I do appreciate. Like they try to touch on a few deeper themes, like insecurity for some of the characters. I found some of the cutscenes involving the little what are the rock guys called that you find?
Coco.
Yeah, the Coco. I thought some of them were a little endearing, like a little, they were either cute or heartfelt or bittersweet. I actually liked a few of those. So it kind of tapers off near the end as well. But I like the direction they were going in. They just didn't stick the landing from what I've seen, based on beating on normal difficulty.
Yeah, they didn't stick the landing in terms of both story and just like the overall gameplay. And like I swear, if the final boss is behind the hard mode, I'm gonna be so pissed. Like, what the heck? There's no indication that
No,
this
there's
is
none. Like the game should tell you that. Like, hey, by the way, if you play again on hard, and I assume that would be something you can just activate by changing the difficulty to hard. So I mean, that's something we could probably just go check out for ourselves right after this discussion. So maybe we'll do that and see if it changes anything.
You're gonna have to do it because
Yeah.
my save
That's
file's
right.
gone. Oh, darn it. Yeah, we got a super chat from Jeremy Lewis. Thank you so much. No spoilers, but are there any cyberspace level themes that are not Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, or City themed? So I mentioned this in my review. Those are the only 4 themes, and it's seriously disappointing. Yeah, like the level designs are all different, right? But they all visually are just Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, and a city theme, which like there's a few Sonic City levels, and it's not based on any particular one. But yeah, that was another reason why those levels were disappointing. And the music, it's like dubstep. And like you think I'm sure they have like hints of like classic Sonic music in there, but all I heard while playing was just the annoying techno dubstep, which was just, yeah, when I kept replaying them over and over again to get that S rank. Some of them are really hard to get S rank, and it's not like they get harder as you go on. It's a roller coaster of difficulties, man. But yeah, that music was just bad. Like on its own is fine, I think, but like as Sonic levels, it's just like, no, I expect better. The Supersonic music was lit AF though. I know you may not know what I just said, old man, but it's good music.
I know a bad word when I hear it, Joey. Jonah's random video says, I think this game was made for most of the new people who came from the movies and it's a good base for a bright future. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something Joe and I would both agree with, that like there is a very I mean, I would go so far as to say I think this is absolutely the direction for 3D Sonic. I think this is the only way. I mean, it's not the only way, but this is the way I would want to see it continue. I had more fun with this game than any other 3D Sonic. I'm including colors in here, and I loved colors at the time. I don't think I'd enjoy quite as much these days, based on replaying a bit of the remaster. But I had a blast with this. Yes, I have a lot of issues. I've gone through them. I agree with most of Joey's complaints. But putting all that aside, the bulk of the game is spent in that open zone gameplay, at least 80%, maybe even more. And that's a part of the game that I want to stress, for me at least. I had a blast with it. It is fun. I liked just running around, darting between, buildings or structures.
You had a Sonic 3D
Sonic
blast.
3D blast. Exactly. That's right. And it just felt good. It just felt good. And that's something that I haven't felt in this 3D Sonic game since maybe, like, some of those earlier Sonic Adventure levels. Like, I never had, and to be fair, I haven't played every 3D Sonic, so maybe there were, maybe Forces, for instance, handled it well too. But I think having that open zone gameplay really makes the boost formula shine, because I really enjoy just getting that, like, I see something in the background or in the distance, I'm like, I want to go there. I just boost at like 1,000 miles per hour and run my way there. That's so cool. I mean, I would go so far as to say this might be, I don't think I've had more fun traversing an open world game than this. That's not to say it's the best open world game, but I don't think I've had more fun moving around an open world than I have had here. Maybe Halo Infinite actually got close with its, with its awesome grapple hook gameplay, but it overall, like, this was just a blast to just maneuver around.
And now, I wouldn't say this is the only way 3D Sonic should move forward, because I know you may not have liked Sonic Generations,
No,
but I thought that was like one of the best 3D Sonic games. I thought that boost formula in that game was good. Even the 2D levels, I thought, from what I remember at least, were way better made than the 2D levels in Forces and Frontiers. And I feel like Sonic Team forgot how to make a good 3D Sonic game after that. The Sonic Frontiers is, I'm like, I say like forgot how to make a good 3D Sonic game. Sonic Frontiers is still a step above like Forces and stuff. And I would probably consider Sonic Frontiers a good game, even if I'm mixed on it. And I think that also ultimately depends. You and I you say like you agree with most of my criticisms, and yet we both still feel kind of differently about this game, and that's where the differences will lie in opinion on this game. People are going to be affected by the bad things differently, or like what it doesn't do as well. And I also felt the same way about a similar open world game, Immortals Phoenix Rising, and I think that kind of got a similar reception too. It all depends on how you feel about the good stuff. If it really overtakes the numerous flaws, and for me, it almost did. I felt like the good stuff was really, 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 really good at first, and yet there was still like befuddled by like all these other flaws. But by the time I got to that ending and those credits rolled, I was just like, and keep in mind, I was already starting to feel like the formula was getting stale at this point. But when it got to that conclusion, that's kind of where I said, I can't in good confidence say that I liked this game, but I also can't say I didn't like this game. So that's where I ultimately landed on the mixed score, is just because like the buildup was just to that conclusion was just, well, the buildup was fine. The conclusion was a mess, and can't even call it a mess. There's barely anything there. And I can see myself revisiting this game too. So that's where I'm lying in with the mixed stuff. And that's what the mixed score is. It's just like, oh my God, it's this, but it's also this.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's something, people may be missing, is that it's not saying that the game doesn't have good elements. You're saying it has good and bad, and it just kind of like averages out. But that, there are moments. This game is just very uneven. I think that might be, a good way of clarifying it. Like, there are parts of the game that work really well. There are parts that are a little iffier and don't work as great. And it does feel like, it didn't all entirely come together. Like, not every system in the game feels fully cohesive with the rest. But, I think that's going to affect different people different ways, as it has for us. That bothered you a little bit more than it did for me. And that's totally fine. It's not everyone's going to agree on everything. Oh,
right.
Thank you.
We got super chat. You were going to read that?
No, can you get that? I actually missed that.
Okay. Puddin Plays. Thank you for the super chat. It says Sonic Adventure 2 soap shoes / customization options. Also, ciao. I'm just like, lots of things to unpack here. I didn't get the soap shoes yet. I don't think they were. I don't know if I got the email to download them yet. But I'm looking forward to checking out those shoes from Sonic Adventure 2. No chow in this game. Sorry. It's so funny. The Sonic team head, I forget his name, said like Chow Garden was our most requested like feature, and then they were asked, "Is it back?" No. I think that's a safe lock for the next game, though. If they keep saying like it's asked for, people are asking for it, but people have been asking for Sonic Adventure 3 for over a decade, and they still haven't given us that. So
I feel like, although I feel like this is probably the closest to a Sonic Adventure 3 we may have had, even though it's very different in its own way, but they at least tie in some ways, which I kind of appreciate.
They mention past games a lot in this one, so that's kind of cool, but they're just nothing more than callbacks. Like Sonic stops and says, "Wow, this waterfall reminds me of the Mystic Ruins." Get used to more of those Easter eggs, quote unquote.
By the way, you should turn off, I don't know if you adjusted it, Joey, there's an option in the game that lets you keep moving around during this little like vignettes where he's talking, and that's way better. It's fun just to mess around as he's like chatting, and the camera I think is static. You're just like running off as he's having like this moment of recollection, and it's hilarious. So
oh yeah, well, look at that, Mystic Ruins
as he falls off a cliff.
Now, is there anything else you wanted to bring up? Because I did kind of want to talk a little bit more about the general consensus of this game, because I got the Metacritic and OpenCritic page.
Is there a general consensus? It seems to be all over the place.
The general consensus is that there is no general consensus.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I was kind of breathing a little sigh of relief when I woke up and I saw those reviews because I'm just like, am I in the minority here? Is everyone else going to love this game except me? Nope, just about what I expected. Very mixed,
Mhm.
and I think that's a testament to how this game is. And those kind of mixed games tend to be a little more interesting than the ones with like a general consensus. So right now the game's sitting at 7, and most of these reviews are all PS5. There's nothing on the Switch yet. Some people got their Switch copies early. I haven't touched this game on Switch yet. But right now the general consent, the meta score on Metacritic is 73, and the Open Critic score. First of all, did they count our review in there yet? I don't know yet,
I don't know
but
if we're factored in there yet. Yeah.
probably not. But the top critic average is 73, and 57% of the critics recommended this game. So yeah, fairly mixed across the board. I've seen a score as high as 9 out of 10 and a score as low as 1 out of 5. And if you guys have listened to our discussion for this past 50 minutes, you can know why. It does a lot of things right, or does a few things right, I would say. I'd say only a few, but it does them really, really, really well. But it's just plagued by a bunch of dumb, bad decisions in there.
Yeah, I think to clarify, at least for me, a little farther, I think the things it does well is the majority of the gameplay. Like the things that it does well directly
Right.
correlate to the open zone gameplay, and it's just that the other issues do pop up fairly frequently as part of that, and or as you're exploring, and that can be an issue. As I said, it took me a few hours to get over those issues. I didn't like the combat, I didn't like the constant interruptions of the tutorials. I thought it was really slow to get moving, which is ironic for a Sonic game, because it even starts you in like a fairly linear area before you're even thrown into the more open world.
Right.
And when it does throw you into it, you almost feel a little bit lost, like, okay, what do I do now? So it took a little while for that all to fully start clicking for me, but once it did, that's when I really started to, have fun from that point.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just how even then, like, I'm surprised somebody even gave it a 1 out of 5. That just goes to show how mixed everything is. And I know people like to dog on the most lowest reviewer, and I'm like, okay, guys, fun fact about game reviewers: we're humans with opinions. Did you
Right.
know that we're human beings?
Yeah, well, I see like Tim in the chat saying so many reviewers struggling to say that the game isn't great today. I mean, I don't think that's a fair way of looking at it, and I haven't looked at too many of the other reviews. I can't speak on behalf of anyone else. But like, I was gonna be the first in line to tell people that I didn't like this game. I have no allegiance to Sonic. I don't care about the series in general. Which doesn't say I haven't tried playing them over the years. I just don't care. Like I have no allegiance to it at all.
Right.
So the fact that I enjoyed the game as much as I did is shocking to me. Even if there are elements, I mean, I'll be fully honest. This is probably one of the weirder games I've played because typically when you have that many elements of the game that conflict with the enjoyment of the core game, it will be a major issue for me. But for whatever reason, it didn't factor in this much for me and didn't substantially take away from my enjoyment of the core gameplay, being again the open zone exploration. And so yeah, I think it can sometimes be difficult to put that into words. It's like, yeah, parts of the game aren't great, but you can still have fun in spite of that. Or, those elements do add up to the point that the game, is a little bit mixed, is mixed overall, and it can be difficult to concretely say this game is good or bad. I mean, as if that is even something anyone can declare. Like that's all subjective. So, yeah, there is no like objective good. The issues we have, Joey, other people may not have at all. People may love the combat. People may love, people may like the story. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of like, if you're gonna buy Sonic Frontiers anyway, I say do it, see what you think of it, because even though I was really mixed on this game, I can see a lot of Sonic fans, especially, enjoy this game. Like we talk about how this may be like for newcomers more so, but I don't know. I still see this game as something Sonic fans are really gonna like, even if they didn't like Forces, which I know. There are some people who really, really like Forces. There's a lot of people who don't like Forces. But man, Frontiers is definitely something you really got to check out for yourself to really see where you fall in line. Because if Andre, who's not a diehard Sonic fan by any means, can really enjoy this game, anything is possible. And I'm not even saying like this, if you don't like Sonic, this is the game for you. Or if you do like Sonic, this is the game for you. I love Sonic and I'm still mixed on it. So that's kind of where I'm like, there is no concrete answer I have for you. Play it for yourself.
Yeah, Millaby, I'm going to figure out how to pronounce that name one of these days, says in the chat, and I think they say it well, this sounds like one of those strong wow factor games where it has factors that can make you ignore flaws if it's just right for you. And I think that's it. Like, I think what it largely comes down to in general for games, if you like the game, its issues will stand out less to you. If you don't like the game, they will stand out more to you. So, like, even though for instance, I agree with almost every complaint Joey had in the review, it's like, they didn't amount to all that much for me. Though I can see how it would for others. And I think that's just how it works out. And in this case, I happen to enjoy the core gameplay so much that its numerous issues didn't amount to enough to take away from the game for me. Whereas, I used the Mario Sunshine example earlier. Back when I played it originally, they definitely did. I'm like, there's so many issues here. It's affecting my enjoyment of the game. But now when I went back to that 20 years later, I'm like, you know what? I can see what they're going for more now, and I actually had fun with it the second time, which still blows my mind because I have been a Sunshine hater for most of my life. So
yeah, opinions can change, and I'm curious to see how I'll feel about this game when I play it again. I'll tell you this, though, when I started a new save file, I was pretty excited about doing some of the stuff.
Oh, like, what do you mean?
Skipping every cutscene, perhaps, because that's story.
Oh, yeah, that probably helps. That probably, you know what? Speaking of which, there are so many of those freaking cutscenes where, like, you're throwing over memory tokens or whatever. I was skipping all of those. Were you as well, or?
Oh, yeah. So like I'm just like, no, I don't want to watch this over and over again. And the portal cutscenes were also like ridiculously long too. Just like, how long does it take to get to warp into cyberspace? Come on.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that should have all been a little bit quicker, but at least you can't skip most of them. So one thing too, I saw some people talk about the 30 frames per second about the game. If you're playing on PS5 or Xbox Series S or X, I imagine, definitely turn on performance mode or the 60 frames per second mode. That's a way to play the game. Forget 4K.
Right.
It's way better at 60 frames per second. Going back, I found it to be impossible to go back to 30 frames per second after swapping over, and I don't know why that's not the default.
Oh, yeah, like that's. 30 frames per second is so ugly when you're used to playing the game at 60 frames per second. And that's like the key point, is just like, if it might look fine at first, but man, for this game, you need that 60 frames per second. But if you only have a PS4, an Xbox One, or a Switch, like don't let that, and you still want to play this game, don't let our opinions about frame rate get in the way. Like, if that's the only way you can play it, then go ahead, by all means, try it out there. But Andre, I think we forgot to touch on one of the most bafflingly bad things about this game.
What?
Supersonic battles.
Oh god, we totally did skip over that. Yeah, we talked about the boss fights in general, more the boss fights in the zones itself. We didn't talk about the final zone, the final boss at the end of each zone. Yeah, what do you think?
Right. Oh my goodness. They're so awful. Like, you start off, the cameraman's like this. And it's just like, oh my goodness, the camera control is so bad. And every time Sonic gets knocked back, like, the camera pans to him, like facing away from the boss. So you don't see the next attack coming.
Right.
It's just like, oh, it's so baffling. It's terrible.
Yeah, they're weird. Like, initially, I really didn't like them. Once I understood how they work, they didn't bother me as much, but they're still stupid. Yeah, because you broke it down in the review. All you do is basically you run up to them, you attack a bunch, you counter, there's no timing of countering or parrying. You just hold them down, and then eventually you'll parry whatever the attack is. That makes them vulnerable. Then you attack some more, and that's basically the gameplay loop, unless you accidentally get hit and get sent a little ways away, as you mentioned. So, yeah, in fact, I would say, Joey, the best parts about those battles is actually the part before the supersonic portion, where you have to activate, you have to get on top and get the final Chaos Emerald from them. And I actually thought that part was cool. The rest, everything after that point, was the lame portion. So,
yeah, it was just super disappointing. Like, supersonic battles in the past, from what I recall, at least in Sonic Adventure 2, stuff like that, they were fun because it was like, oh, I'm overpowered Sonic, I'm Super Saiyan Sonic, fun fact, Super Saiyans, fun fact there. We're super cool, at least when I was a kid. I haven't played supersonic battles in a long time, right? But here, they're just a mess, dude. It's just like, I want to feel super when I'm playing a supersonic, and I can't feel super if I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential to improve the super that style of gameplay. Like one of the things is you're basically locked into a 2D plane, so you don't really have any like freedom of movement with flying around. I think that could make it a lot more fun, and I hope that's something to build on. Like, could you imagine how fun it would be to be able to zip around these levels, like the full level at Supersonic as like a
Oh
end
yeah.
game unlockable or something, which as far as I'm aware is not here at all, and it's too bad that they didn't quite nail that element of the game.
Yeah, it was just strange. Like, I'm not sure how to like, yeah, you figure out later on like how these bosses work. I did think there were some elements that were kind of cool, like being able to like grab one of their weapons and like throw it back at them, which is something later on that was kind of neat. But man, they needed some serious polish. And if and if they like pushed back the release or like the initial release of Sonic Frontiers to like really work on the polishing, man, can't imagine what that would have been like if they stuck with their like 30th anniversary of Sonic release date. Man, oh man. Like, yeah, there's not a buggy game, but there's still just kind of a lack of polish in
Yeah.
some regards, like in the animation department, in the in like the supersonic battles especially needed hella more polish.
Yeah, again, it very much like Mario Sunshine, I think. Like a few more months of development could have really offered a more refined experience on the whole. So, uh, Jake, Jake's in the chat asking, just came back to ask an important question: how much love does Shadow get?
Oh, Jake. Oh,
Jake's just
Jakey,
trolling.
Jakey.
Jake's just trolling us. All right,
He
Joey.
better be.
Any final thoughts about Sonic Frontiers before we wrap it up here?
Play what you like, play what you're excited for. If you're really still looking forward to Sonic Frontiers, I'll admit I was really excited for this game. I really was. And even then I still came away with it from it mixed. But I still think like if you are excited for this game and if you are planning to pick it up anyway, go ahead and do it. Like you might still love the good stuff like way more than the negatives, and that's okay. Guess what? It's okay to have different opinions, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. That's it. If you're still curious about the game, definitely check it out. As I said, I'm not historically a 3D Sonic fan outside of Sonic Colors, and I ended up having a really good time despite the many nitpicks I may have with the game. So yeah, it really just it's a very subjective. I think it's gonna be a very subjective game. It'll be interesting to see how things shake out in the future, and I'm very curious to see the reaction people have to that ending sequence. Although again, we'll need to check out apparently this supposed final. Hidden final boss, Joey, possibly. We'll see if that exists or not, and whether it affects anything. So, all right, chat. Thank you so much for hanging out today as we discussed our slightly varied opinions on Sonic Frontiers. The game's out in just a few days, so you can all check out for yourself. Or actually, isn't it tomorrow? It's out tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it's out tonight.
Tonight. Oh my god.
I don't know if Sega. I think Sega waits. I don't think.
Yeah,
they do, like,
it may not be
time
a
zone thing.
midnight launch. In any case, it's out very soon. So let us know what you think in the comments below once you actually get your hands on it. We'd love to hear everything that you have to say about the game. And that's
thank you, Carlos, for moderating the chat.
Yes,
My
that was
goodness.
much appreciated. All right, as always, Carlos. So everyone, thank you again for watching. Stay tuned to us for more coverage on this game, including all kinds of features and tips and all that. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.